Before we begin the story, let us know where you're watching from by leaving a comment below. Don't forget to like and subscribe. Have a wonderful day. Enjoy the story, everyone. Chapter 1. Shattered Dreams. The grand Whitmore mansion loomed before Amara Cade like a beautiful prison, its Gothic architecture casting long shadows across the perfectly manicured lawn. Crystal chandeliers sparkled through towering windows, their light seeming to mock the darkness in her heart. At 19, she should have been dreaming of love and romance, choosing her own path through life. Instead, she stood frozen in an elaborate wedding dress that felt more like chains than silk, her heart heavy with the weight of inevitability. The wedding planner fussed around her, adjusting the train of her dress, a masterpiece of ivory lace and pearls that cost more than most people's yearly salary. The irony wasn't lost on Amara. The Whitmores had spared no expense for this wedding, yet treated her like something they'd scraped off their shoes. 5 minutes, Miss Cade, the wedding planner chirped, either oblivious to or deliberately ignoring the bride's distress. Amara caught her reflection in the full-length mirror. The girl staring back at her seemed like a stranger, skin the color of rich mahogany, eyes bright with unshed tears, and lips painted the perfect shade of dusty rose. She looked every inch the society bride, but her heart felt like a trapped bird beating against its cage. The whispers followed her everywhere, even on her wedding day. They echoed through the corridors of the mansion like persistent ghosts. The unlucky black girl, the orphan who brought death to her wealthy parents, the charity case turned forced bride. Each whisper was a knife to her heart, each sympathetic glance a twist of the blade. "You look beautiful, dear." Evelyn Whitmore's voice cut through her thoughts like ice. Julian's mother stood in the doorway, her silver-streaked hair perfectly coiffed, her designer dress screaming old money, though perhaps a simpler dress would have been more appropriate for someone of your background. Amara lifted her chin, refusing to let this woman see her pain. "The dress you chose is lovely, Mrs. Whitmore, though perhaps if I'd been allowed to select my own, I might have chosen something less ostentatious." Evelyn's lips thinned. "Careful, girl. Remember your place. This marriage may have been arranged, but that doesn't mean we have to make it any more difficult than necessary." "My place?" Amara's voice was soft but steady. "And what place would that be, Mrs. Whitmore? The orphan you're forcing your son to marry, or the heiress whose fortune you're so desperate to control?" Before Evelyn could respond, the wedding march began to play. Amara's uncle appeared, his expensive suit reeking of new money and desperation. This man, her last living relative, had sold her like cattle to the highest bidder. She took his arm mechanically, feeling nothing but contempt for the uncle who had betrayed her trust so completely. The walk down the aisle was a blur of faces. New York's elite, the cream of society, all gathered to witness this farce of a wedding. At the end of that long walk stood Julian Whitmore, tall and impossibly handsome in his tailored tuxedo, looking like he'd rather be anywhere else in the world. His gray eyes met hers, and the coldness in them made her shiver. This was the man she was supposed to spend her life with, the man who hadn't spoken a single word to her during their entire engagement, the man who had made his disgust for this arrangement painfully clear through his absence and silence. The ceremony passed in a haze of traditional vows and empty promises. Amara spoke her parts mechanically, each I do feeling like another nail in her coffin of dreams. Julian's responses were equally hollow, his voice carrying across the hushed church like distant thunder. The reception was a grand affair, with champagne flowing freely and orchestra music filling the air. Amara played her part perfectly. The gracious bride, the perfect addition to the Whitmore family. But inside, she was screaming. It wasn't until they reached their wedding suite that the facade finally cracked. Julian's thunderous voice echoed through the room, bouncing off the expensive wallpaper and crystal fixtures. "Let me make this clear," he snarled, his steel-gray eyes boring into her. The perfect gentleman of the ceremony was gone, replaced by raw fury. "This marriage is nothing but a business arrangement forced upon me. I will never love you, never touch you, and I won't give you the satisfaction of a divorce either." Amara stood her ground, even as her heart shattered. She'd lost everything, her parents, her dreams, her freedom, but she refused to lose her dignity. "I didn't ask for this marriage any more than you did, Mr. Whitmore. Your parents may have bought my uncle's loyalty, but they can't buy my dignity." Dignity? He laughed, the sound harsh and bitter. Is that what you call it? Selling yourself to the highest bidder? You know nothing about me. Amara's voice trembled but held firm. You never bothered to learn. You made assumptions based on my skin color, my circumstances. You're so convinced I'm some gold digger that you never stopped to ask why I might have been forced into this just as much as you. For a moment, something flickered in Julian's eyes, uncertainty, perhaps, or a crack in his perfect wall of prejudice, but it was gone as quickly as it appeared. The room down the hall will be yours, he said coldly. I don't want to see you unless it's absolutely necessary for appearances. The staff will bring you anything you need. Amara watched him stride toward the door, his broad shoulders rigid with tension. Before he could leave, she spoke one last time, her voice carrying years of pain and determination. One day, Mr. Whitmore, you'll realize that the true prisoner in this arrangement isn't me. It's you. You're so bound by your prejudices and assumptions that you can't even see the truth in front of you. He paused for a fraction of a second, his hand on the doorknob, but didn't turn around. Then he was gone, leaving Amara alone in the opulent suite that felt more like a mausoleum than a bridal chamber. She carefully removed the wedding dress, hanging it in the closet like a ghost of dreams never realized. In her simple silk slip, she moved to the window, watching the last guests leave the Whitmore mansion. Their laughter floated up to her window, a cruel reminder of what this day should have been. A single tear rolled down her cheek, but she wiped it away firmly. She was Amara Cade, daughter of Nathaniel and Elise Cade, and she had survived worse than Julian Whitmore's contempt. If this was to be her life now, she would face it with the same strength that had carried her through the death of her parents and the betrayal of her uncle. As the moon rose over the Whitmore estate, Amara made a promise to herself. She might be trapped in this loveless marriage, but she would never let them break her spirit. Let Julian Whitmore keep his promises of never loving her. She hadn't come here for love anyway. She'd come for truth, for justice, and someday she would have both. The night wrapped around her like a cold embrace, and somewhere in the vast mansion, a clock struck midnight. Her first day as Mrs. Whitmore had begun, and with it, a new chapter in her life, one she would write on her own terms, regardless of what they all expected from her. Chapter 2: Shadows of the Past. The next 6 months in the Whitmore mansion unfolded like a carefully choreographed dance of avoidance and silent suffering. Each morning, Amara would wake before dawn, watching the sun paint the sky in shades of pink and gold from her window, the only beauty she allowed herself to enjoy in this gilded cage. The mansion staff treated her with a peculiar mixture of pity and distance, never quite sure whether to address her as the lady of the house or ignore her presence altogether. Their uncertainty was understandable. Julian treated the mansion as his kingdom, and Amara as an unwanted servant, making it clear through his actions that she held no real position of authority. Evelyn Whitmore, however, had no such reservations about Amara's place in the household. She took particular pleasure in assigning her the most demeaning tasks, always with a smile that never reached her cold eyes. "Polish the silver again, girl," Evelyn demanded one morning, running a perfectly manicured finger across the dining room sideboard. "At least make yourself useful, since you can't give my son the love he deserves, though I doubt someone like you understands the concept of real love." Amara's hands tightened around the silver polish cloth, but her voice remained steady. "Love, Mrs. Whitmore, is that what you call forcing your son into a loveless marriage for business gains?" Evelyn's face hardened. "Watch your tongue. You're here because we allowed it. Don't forget that your uncle was more than happy to make this arrangement." "My uncle," Amara replied softly, "sold his soul long before he sold me, but at least he was honest about his greed." The slap echoed through the dining room, sharp and sudden. Evelyn's hand trembled with rage as she lowered it. "You ungrateful little," Julian's voice cut through the tension like a blade. He stood in the doorway, his expression unreadable as he took in the scene before him. "The board members are waiting in the study." Evelyn composed herself instantly, smoothing her designer dress. "Of course, darling. I was just giving our dear Amara some household instructions." She swept past her son, pausing only to kiss his cheek, a gesture he received with rigid formality. Once Evelyn left, Julian's eyes met Amara's. For a moment, Something flickered in their depths, perhaps concern or guilt, but it was gone before she could be sure. Without a word, he turned and followed his mother, leaving Amara alone with her thoughts and the silver that needed polishing. What they didn't know was that every night, after the mansion fell silent, Amara would retreat to the vast library. Among the leather-bound volumes and ancient tomes, she found her sanctuary. Here, she could be herself again, the brilliant student who had earned a full scholarship to Stanford, the young woman who had dreamed of revolutionizing the business world. She would lose herself in books about business and finance, the very subjects she had been studying before her life was derailed. Sometimes, she'd work until dawn, poring over financial journals and market analyses, keeping her mind sharp even as they tried to dull her spirit. One particular evening, as autumn winds rattled the library windows, Amara discovered something interesting in the Whitmore Enterprises public financial reports. She'd been tracking the company's performance, noting patterns and inconsistencies that others might have missed. Her finger traced a series of transactions that seemed oddly familiar. The library isn't meant for servants. Amara didn't need to look up to know. Julian stood in the doorway. His presence had become something she could feel, like an approaching storm. "Then it's fortunate that I'm your wife, not your servant," she replied, continuing to make notes in her journal, "though I understand the confusion, given how similar the roles seem to be in this household." He moved closer, his expensive cologne mixing with the scent of old books. "What are you doing here? Reading? It's generally what people do in libraries." She finally looked up at him, taking in his appearance. He must have just returned from some late business meeting. His tie was loosened, and his usually perfect hair showed signs of frustrated fingers running through it. "These are confidential company documents. They're public financial reports, Mr. Whitmore, available to any citizen with an internet connection and basic reading comprehension." She closed her journal deliberately. "Though I suppose expecting you to know that would require you to see me as a citizen rather than property." Something dangerous flashed in his eyes. "You know nothing about business or what it takes to run a company like Whitmore Enterprises. I know enough to see that someone's been siphoning money from your charitable foundation into offshore accounts." The words left her mouth before she could stop them. Julian froze, his expression shifting from dismissive to intense in an instant. "What did you say?" But Amara had already gathered her materials, rising from the leather armchair with fluid grace. "Good night, Mr. Whitmore. I'm sure you have more important things to do than discuss business with someone like me." As she passed him, his hand shot out, grabbing her wrist. It was the first time he had touched her since their wedding day, and the contact sent an unwanted shiver down her spine. "Show me what you found," he demanded, his voice low and urgent. "Why? So you can tell me I'm wrong, that I couldn't possibly understand such complex matters." She pulled her wrist free. "I may be trapped in this marriage, Mr. Whitmore, but I won't be your convenient source of information when it suits you." She left him standing in the library, surrounded by the ghosts of her parents' dreams for her. Nathaniel and Elise Cade had raised their daughter to be strong, independent, and brilliant. Their deaths might have left her vulnerable to her uncle's machinations, but they couldn't take away her intelligence or her dignity. The next morning, Amara found a stack of financial documents outside her door, internal reports that weren't available to the public. On top was a note in Julian's precise handwriting, "Prove it." She should have thrown them back in his face, should have maintained the wall of cold indifference they'd built between them. Instead, she spent the next 3 nights analyzing the documents, tracking money trails, and building a case that would be impossible to ignore. When she finally emerged from the library, dark circles under her eyes but triumph in her heart, she found Julian waiting for her. He sat in one of the leather chairs, his usual impeccable appearance slightly rumpled, suggesting he'd been there for hours. "You're good at this," he said without preamble. "I know. Where did you learn to analyze financial data like this?" "Stanford Business School, before your family's arrangement forced me to drop out." She placed her comprehensive report on the table between them. "Everything you need to know is in there. What you do with it is your concern, not mine." As she turned to leave, his voice stopped her. "You were at Stanford? There's a lot you don't know about me, Mr. Whitmore, but then again, you never asked." The days that followed brought subtle changes to the household routine. Evelyn's demands became less frequent, though no less cutting when they came. The staff began addressing Amara as Mrs. Whitmore more consistently, and Julian started appearing in the library in the evenings, silently working on his laptop while Amara read. They rarely spoke during these encounters, but the quality of their silence changed. It was less hostile, more contemplative, as if they were both re-evaluating their assumptions about each other. One evening, about 5 months into their marriage, Amara heard raised voices from Julian's study. She recognized Evelyn's shrill tones and Julian's deeper rumble, though she couldn't make out the words. When Evelyn stormed out, her face was flushed with anger, and she shot Amara a look of pure venom. Later that night, as Amara worked in the library, Julian appeared in the doorway. He looked tired, the weight of whatever argument he'd had with his mother evident in the slump of his shoulders. "She wants me to have the marriage annulled," he said without preamble. Amara's heart skipped a beat, but her voice remained steady. "And what do you want, Mr. Whitmore?" He studied her for a long moment, his gray eyes unreadable in the dim library light. "I don't know anymore." It wasn't much, but it was the most honest thing he'd ever said to her. As he left the library, Amara realized that the careful dance they'd been performing for the past 6 months was about to change its rhythm. Whether that change would bring them closer together or tear them further apart remained to be seen. What she didn't know was that upstairs, in his private study, Julian was looking at her Stanford transcripts, reading about the brilliant student who had been on track to graduate summa cum laude before tragedy, struck the same student he had dismissed as a gold digger, the same woman he had condemned without trial. The foundations of his prejudices were beginning to crack, though he wasn't ready to admit it yet. But as autumn gave way to winter and the nights grew longer and colder, something was shifting in the Whitmore mansion, something neither of them was prepared for. Chapter 3. The Breaking Point. The winter storm that raged outside the Whitmore mansion matched the turbulence brewing within its walls. Amara sat in Theodore Whitmore's study, surrounded by stacks of financial documents, her fingers flying across the keyboard of her laptop. The grandfather clock in the corner struck midnight, its deep chimes echoing through the empty house. She had discovered something in the company's records that made her blood run cold. A pattern of transactions, carefully hidden beneath layers of legitimate business dealings, pointed to something far more sinister than simple embezzlement. The numbers told a story, one that seemed to connect directly to her parents' death 6 years ago. The sound of footsteps in the hallway made her freeze. She knew that stride, had learned to recognize it over the past 6 months of their forced marriage. Julian was supposed to be in Chicago for a board meeting. His early return could only mean trouble. The study door flew open, and Julian stood there, his normally perfect appearance disheveled from travel, his gray eyes locked onto her, storm clouds gathering in their depths. "What are you doing in my father's study?" His voice was low, dangerous. Amara straightened her spine but didn't rise from the leather chair. "Finding the truth your family tried to bury along with my parents. You have no right." "I have every right." The force of her voice surprised them both. "While you've been playing the role of the wronged son, forced to marry beneath his station, I've been piecing together the real reason behind this marriage." Julian stalked into the room, his presence filling the space with barely contained fury. "You don't know what you're talking about." "Don't I?" Amara turned her laptop around. "These transactions, dated 6 years ago, the same month my parents died in that tragic accident. Millions of dollars moved through shell companies, all leading back to Whitmore Enterprises and my uncle's failing business." Julian's face paled as he scanned the screen. "Where did you get these records?" "I'm not the ignorant girl you think I am." Amara's voice trembled with 6 months of suppressed anger. "I was top of my class at Stanford before your family's machinations destroyed my life. I know how to follow a money trail." "Stanford?" The word seemed to catch in his throat. "Yes, Stanford Business School, full scholarship." Each word was a weapon aimed at his prejudices. "Surprised? Did you think I was just some poor black girl your parents picked up from the streets? Or maybe you believed your mother's lies about me being a gold digger?" Julian sank into the chair across from her, his eyes never leaving the screen. "This can't be right." "But it is." Amara leaned forward, her voice intense. "Your father and my uncle orchestrated everything. The accident that killed my parents. the sudden discovery of their debts, the convenient solution of marrying me off to you to save the family name. It was all planned. No? But there was uncertainty in his voice now. Look at the dates, Julian. It was the first time she'd used his first name. Look at the shell companies, the offshore accounts. The same pattern repeats 6 years later, right before our wedding. They're not even trying to hide it anymore because they think they've won. Thunder crashed outside, making the windows rattle. Julian ran a hand through his hair, a gesture she'd come to recognize as a sign of internal struggle. If what you're saying is true, Amara's laugh was bitter. I've spent every night for the past 6 months in this library, putting together the pieces while you treated me like a servant. I know what I found. Julian stood abruptly, pacing the length of the study. Why didn't you come to me with this sooner? When should I have done that? Between your mother's daily humiliations and your cold shoulder? Or maybe during one of the many conversations we didn't have because you couldn't bear to look at me? Her words hit their mark. Julian stopped pacing, turning to face her with an expression she'd never seen before. Regret. I made assumptions, he admitted quietly. You made judgments, she corrected, based on nothing but your own prejudices and your parents' lies. She stood, gathering her materials with trembling hands. The weight of her discoveries, of this confrontation, was finally hitting her. 6 years of wondering, of grieving, of trying to understand why her perfect world had shattered it all led to this moment. Your father killed them, she whispered, her voice breaking. And now I'm trapped in this loveless marriage with his son. Julian moved toward her, but she held up a hand to stop him. Don't pretend to care, now that you know I'm not what you thought. Your guilt doesn't make up for 6 months of cruelty. Amara Mrs. Whitmore, she corrected coldly. That's what you wanted, isn't it? A wife in name only. Well, congratulations. You got exactly what you asked for. She moved to leave, but he caught her arm. Unlike their encounter in the library weeks ago, his touch wasn't demanding. It was pleading. Wait. Please. The word please from Julian Whitmore's lips was so unexpected that it stopped her in her tracks. I need to understand everything. From the beginning. Amara looked at his hand on her arm, then up at his face. The arrogant mask he usually wore was gone, replaced by something raw and real. Why now, she asked. What's changed? Everything. His voice was rough with emotion. I've been watching you these past weeks, seeing how you work, how you think. The way you spotted that embezzlement scheme in the Foundation, no one else had caught that. Not our accountants, not our auditors, just you. So now I'm worthy of your attention because I'm smart enough to be useful? No. Julian released her arm but didn't step back. You're worthy of my attention because I was wrong about everything. The grandfather clock chimed again, marking the passage of another hour. Outside, the storm continued to rage, but inside the study, something was shifting. The air itself seemed charged with possibility. Tell me about Stanford, Julian said softly. Tell me about your parents. Tell me everything I should have asked 6 months ago. Amara studied him for a long moment, weighing her options. The pain of the past 6 months warred with the need to have someone, anyone, finally understand what she'd lost. It's a long story, she warned. I have time. And so, as the storm raged outside, Amara began to speak. She told him about growing up in her parents' loving home, about their successful technology company, about her dreams of following in their footsteps. She spoke of the scholarship to Stanford, of being one of the few black women in her program, of proving herself over and over until even the doubters had to acknowledge her brilliance. Julian listened without interrupting, his expression growing darker as she described the day she learned of her parents' death, a car accident that had never made sense to her, how her uncle had appeared with news of hidden debts and threatened bankruptcy, how the Whitmore family had swooped in with their solution, presenting it as generosity while holding financial ruin over her head. I never wanted their money, she finished, her voice hoarse from talking. I just wanted to understand why. Why them? Why me? Why this marriage? Julian had moved to the window during her story, staring out at the storm. When he turned back to her, his face was set with determination. We're going to find out, he promised. All of it. And when we do what? Amara challenged. Will you stand against your own father, risk your precious company? Yes. The simplicity of his answer caught her off guard. Why? Julian crossed the room until he stood before her. Because I've spent 6 months living with a woman I refuse to see. Because my father may have killed innocent people for profit. Because for the first time since this marriage began, I'm seeing clearly. He reached out, hesitating for a moment before gently wiping away a tear she hadn't realized had fallen. I can't undo the past 6 months. I can't bring back your parents. But I can help you find the truth, if you'll let me. Amara looked at his offered alliance note quite friendship, certainly not love, but something new and undefined. A partnership born of shared purpose rather than forced obligation. This doesn't fix everything, she warned. You can't just flip a switch and erase months of contempt. I know. His hand fell away from her face. But it's a start. As if in agreement, the storm outside began to quiet, the thunder growing distant. The grandfather clock struck 2, reminding them of the late hour. Tomorrow, Amara said, gathering her laptop and files. We'll start tomorrow. I have 6 months of research to show you. Julian nodded, stepping aside to let her pass. But as she reached the door, he spoke again. I was wrong about you, Amara Cade Whitmore. And I'm sorry. She paused, her hand on the doorknob. Prove it, she said, echoing his own words from weeks ago. As she walked away, leaving him alone in his father's study, neither of them realized that this night would change everything. The careful dance of avoidance was over. In its place, a new partnership was forming. One that would shake the foundations of the Whitmore empire and force them both to confront truths they never expected to find. Chapter 4. An Unexpected Night. The revelation about Amara's past shook Julian's worldview to its core. Over the next few days, he found himself watching her with new eyes, noting the grace with which she handled his mother's barbed comments, the intelligence behind her quiet observations, the strength that kept her chin high despite everything. The Whitmore Enterprises annual charity gala was approaching, and the mansion buzzed with preparations. Evelyn Whitmore had taken charge, as always, filling the house with florists, caterers, and decorators. She'd made a point of excluding Amara from the planning, despite her position as Julian's wife. The gala planning requires a certain social finesse, Evelyn had said, her smile sharp as glass. Perhaps you could help the staff with the cleaning instead, dear. Julian, passing by at that moment, surprised them both. Actually, Mother, Amara will be handling the Foundation's presentation this year. Her financial analysis saved us millions. She's more than qualified to present our charitable initiatives. The look of shock on both women's faces was identical, though for very different reasons. Evelyn recovered first. Darling, be reasonable. The board members will be impressed by her Stanford business background and her keen financial insight, Julian cut in smoothly. Unless you'd prefer I share what we discovered about the Foundation's irregular transactions. Evelyn's face went pale. She left without another word, her heels clicking aggressively against the marble floor. Amara waited until they were alone before speaking. I don't need you to fight my battles. I know, Julian replied, loosening his tie. But I'm trying to right some wrongs, starting with how this family has treated you. A week later, they found themselves working late in the mansion's executive office suite. Preparing for the gala presentation, the storm that had been threatening all day finally broke, rain lashing against the windows as thunder rolled overhead. These numbers don't add up, Amara muttered, frowning at her laptop screen. There's another account we're missing. Julian leaned over her shoulder to look, his cologne wrapping around her like an expensive embrace. Check the offshore holdings. Father kept certain accounts separate from the main books. His proximity was distracting in a way Amara wasn't ready to acknowledge. She'd spent 6 months building walls against this man, walls that were starting to show dangerous cracks. We should head down, she said, standing abruptly. The cleaning staff will want to lock up. They took the executive elevator, the silence between them charged with unspoken words. Halfway down, the lights flickered. Then, with a grinding sound that made them both wince, the elevator shuddered to a stop. Perfect, Amara muttered, pressing the emergency button. Nothing happened. Julian pulled out his phone. No signal. Storm must have knocked out the power. How long until someone realizes we're stuck? At this hour, could be a while. Most of the staff has gone home. Amara sank down to sit against the elevator wall, careful to keep her skirt arranged properly. After a moment's hesitation, Julian joined her, leaving a careful space between them. The emergency lights cast strange shadows, making the small space feel somehow both intimate and alienating. Minutes ticked by in silence. "Tell me about them," Julian said suddenly. "Who?" "Your parents." "What were they like?" Amara turned to look at him, surprised by the genuine interest in his voice. In the dim light, his usual sharp edges seemed softer. "They were brilliant," she said softly. "Not just intellectually, though they were that too. They had this light about them. Dad could make anyone laugh, even in the most serious meetings. Mom had this way of making you feel like you were the most important person in the world when she listened to you." "They sound nothing like my parents," Julian observed. "No," Amara agreed. "Your parents are all sharp edges and cold ambition. Mine taught me that success means nothing if you lose your humanity along the way. And here I am, their killer's son." "Here you are," Amara echoed, "though you're not what I expected either." Julian turned to face her fully. "What did you expect? A carbon copy of your father, cold, calculating, concerned only with power and appearance." She gave a small, humorless laugh. "Instead, you're complicated." "Complicated? You can be cruel," she said honestly. "Those first 6 months. But then you can also be surprisingly kind, like with Evelyn today, or now, asking about my parents." Thunder crashed outside, making the elevator car sway slightly. Amara instinctively grabbed Julian's arm. "Sorry," she murmured, starting to pull away. His hand covered hers, keeping it in place. "Don't be." The air between them grew thick with tension. Amara was acutely aware of every point of contact, her hand on his arm, his fingers over hers, the way their shoulders almost touched. "I never knew," he said quietly, "about your parents, about Stanford." "You never bothered to ask," Amara replied, but the words held no bite. They both knew they were treading new ground here. "I was afraid," Julian admitted. "Of what?" "Of being wrong. About you. About this marriage. About everything I thought I knew." His thumb traced small circles on the back of her hand. "I built this image of you in my mind, this convenient villain to blame for my trapped situation. If I let myself see you as a person, then you'd have to acknowledge your part in my pain," Amara finished. "Yes." Another crash of thunder. Closer this time. The elevator swayed again, but neither of them moved apart. "I read your Stanford thesis," Julian said, "about ethical business practices in times of crisis. It was brilliant." Amara stared at him. "You what?" "After that night in the study, I had to know more. I contacted Stanford, got copies of your academic records. Your professors still talk about that thesis. They said you were on track to revolutionize corporate responsibility practices." "That was another life," Amara said softly, "before everything fell apart. It doesn't have to stay in the past." Julian shifted to face her fully. "You could finish your degree, take your rightful place in the business world." "Why are you saying all this?" "Because I was wrong, Amara. So incredibly wrong. And every day, I learn something new about you that makes me realize just how blind I've been." The intensity in his voice made her breath catch. In the dim emergency lighting, his gray eyes seemed to glow with an inner fire. "Julian." Whatever she was going to say was lost as the elevator gave another violent shake. Amara found herself practically in Julian's lap, his arms wrapped protectively around her. Time seemed to stop. She could feel his heart beating against her palm. Could see the pulse jumping in his throat. His cologne surrounded her, masculine and expensive, and suddenly intoxicating. "Tell me to let go," he whispered. "No." The word had barely left her lips before his mouth found hers. The kiss was nothing like their mechanical wedding day peck. This was fire and need, and 6 months of denied attraction exploding in an instant. Amara's fingers tangled in his hair as his hands roamed her back, pulling her closer. All the walls they'd built, all the pretenses they'd maintained, crumbled in the face of this overwhelming chemistry. When they finally broke apart, both breathing heavily, reality came crashing back. Amara scrambled off his lap, putting distance between them. "This doesn't change anything," she said, but her voice trembled. "It changes everything." Julian's voice was rough with desire. "You feel it too, Amara. This connection between us, it's been there all along, hidden under our anger and prejudice. One kiss doesn't erase 6 months of cruelty." "No," he agreed, standing and reaching for her, "but it's a start." Before she could respond, the elevator hummed to life, lights flickered on, and they began moving again. By the time the doors opened on the ground floor, they had both composed themselves, at least outwardly. "Mrs. Whitmore, Mr. Whitmore." The security guard looked relieved to see them. "We just got the power back. Are you both all right?" "Fine," Amara said quickly. "Just a brief delay." She walked away without looking back, but she could feel Julian's eyes on her. That night, alone in her room, she touched her lips, still tingling from his kiss. Everything had changed, whether she wanted it to or not. The careful distance they'd maintained was shattered, replaced by something far more dangerous: possibility. As she drifted off to sleep, Amara couldn't help but wonder if perhaps the real storm wasn't the one outside, but the one brewing between her and the man she'd been forced to marry, a man who was quickly becoming nothing like what she'd expected, and everything she'd tried not to want. Chapter 5. Morning light. Dawn painted the Whitmore mansion in shades of gold and shadow, but Amara hadn't slept. Every time she closed her eyes, she felt Julian's lips on hers, his arms holding her close in that darkened elevator. The memory refused to fade, haunting her like a bittersweet dream she couldn't shake. She stood at her window, watching gardeners clear debris from last night's storm. The physical chaos outside mirrored the emotional tempest within her heart. 6 months of carefully constructed walls had begun to crumble in a single moment of weakness. Or was it strength? Her fingers traced her lips unconsciously, still feeling the ghost of that kiss. In those precious moments, she glimpsed a different Julianot, the cruel man who had rejected her on their wedding night. But someone new, someone who looked at her with desire instead of disdain, with wonder instead of contempt. A knock at her door made her spine stiffen. She knew that knock, authoritative yet hesitant, nothing like the sharp rapping of the house staff or Evelyn's imperious tapping. Her heart betrayed her with its quickened pace. "Come in," she said, keeping her voice steady as she continued staring out the window. Julian entered, already impeccably dressed in a charcoal suit that reminded her of storm clouds. She could see his reflection in the window glass, noted how his eyes immediately found her. The intensity of his gaze made her skin tingle. "About last night," he began. "Last night was a mistake." The words felt like ashes in her mouth, but she forced them out anyway. Her mother had always taught her that sometimes strength meant denying your own heart to protect it. A moment of weakness brought on by stress and proximity. She heard him move closer, his expensive shoes silent on the plush carpet. The subtle scent of his cologne wrapped around her, achingly familiar after their intimate moment in the elevator. "Is that what you really believe?" His voice was low, intense, sending unwanted shivers down her spine. Now she did turn, facing him with chin lifted defiantly. Her stance was proud. But inside, her heart trembled. "What I believe doesn't matter. You made your position clear on our wedding night, Mr. Whitmore. I won't be your convenient distraction just because you've discovered I have a brain. That's not what this is." He stepped closer, close enough that she could see the flecks of silver in his gray eyes. "You know that's not what this is." "Do I?" She laughed. But there was no humor in it. 6 months of contempt, of treating me like a servant, of letting your mother humiliate me at every turn, and now what? One kiss in an elevator, and suddenly everything's different? Yes. The simplicity of his answer caught her off guard. "Everything is different because I'm different. Because you made me different." "I didn't make you anything," she countered, moving away from his magnetic pull. "I've been the same person all along. You're the one who refused to see me." Her words hit home. She watched as he ran a frustrated hand through his perfect hair, messing it up in a way that made him look younger, more vulnerable, more like the man who had held her with such tenderness in the elevator. "You're right," his admission surprised her. "I was blind, prejudiced, everything you accused me of being, but that doesn't make what happened last night any less real." "Real." Amara wrapped her arms around herself, needing the protection. What's real is that I'm still trapped in this marriage. What's real is that your father likely murdered my parents. What's real is that 6 months of cruelty don't disappear because you finally noticed I'm a person. Then let me prove it to you." He closed the distance between them again, his presence overwhelming her senses. "Let me show you that I've changed, that I want to make this right. And how do you propose to do that?" Her voice cracked despite her best efforts. "Buy me expensive gifts? Give me a position in the company? Make me a real Mrs. Whitmore?" "No." His hand reached for her face, but she turned away, unable to bear his touch when her resolve felt so fragile. "By being your partner in finding the truth, by standing with you against my father, against anyone who's hurt you, by showing you every day that I see you now, truly see you." "Pretty words," Amara murmured, hating how her heart leapt at his declaration. "But words are easy. Actions are what matter. Then let my actions speak." He moved to the door, pausing with his hand on the knob. "The board meeting is at 10. As my wife and a Stanford-educated business analyst, you should be there." Her eyes widened. "Your mother will have to deal with it." His smile held a hint of steel that made her pulse race. "Unless she wants to explain to the board why she's excluding the woman who uncovered major financial irregularities in our charitable foundation." After he left, Amara sank onto her bed, mind racing. Her lips still tingled from the memory of his kiss. Her skin still hummed from his proximity. This was what she'd wanted, wasn't it? Recognition of her abilities, a chance to use her education, to be more than just the unwanted black wife. But her heart, traitor that it was, whispered that she wanted more. That one kiss in a darkened elevator had awakened something she'd thought long dead. Hope. Hope for more than just professional respect. Hope for the kind of love she'd stopped believing in the moment her parents died. She dressed carefully, choosing a cream silk blouse and charcoal pencil skirt that matched Julian's suit, a subtle statement of unity that didn't escape her notice. Her mother's pearl earrings completed the ensemble, a reminder of where she came from, of what she'd lost. The board meeting was held in the mansion's formal conference room, a space dominated by dark wood and leather. Heads turned when she entered beside Julian, whispers following in their wake. But it was different now, not the cruel whispers of before, but something new, something sparked by the way Julian's hand rested protectively at the small of her back, by the proud set of his shoulders as he guided her to the seat beside his. Evelyn's face turned an interesting shade of purple when Julian pulled out Amara's chair. "Darling, surely Mrs. Whitmore would be more comfortable reviewing the foundation's finances." Julian cut in smoothly. "Absolutely, which is why she'll be presenting her findings today." The board members shifted uncomfortably, several shooting concerned glances at Theodore Whitmore's empty chair at the head of the table. He was traveling on business, according to Evelyn, though Amara suspected he was avoiding the fallout from her discoveries. As she presented her analysis, Amara felt a familiar calm settle over her. This was her element. Numbers, patterns, the clean logic of financial flows. She laid out the irregularities she'd found, careful to frame them as concerning discrepancies rather than outright accusations. But it was hard to concentrate with Julian watching her so intently. Every time she glanced his way, she found his eyes on her, filled with something that looked dangerously like pride, like admiration, like desire. The board members' expressions shifted from skepticism to concern to alarm as she walked them through the evidence. Evelyn's face grew progressively paler. "These transactions," one board member interrupted, "they seem to follow a pattern dating back several years." 6 years, to be precise, Amara confirmed. Not looking at Julian, the pattern intensifies around certain significant dates. The implications hung heavy in the air. Everyone knew about the tragic accident that had claimed the lives of technology entrepreneurs Nathaniel and Elise Cade. Everyone knew their daughter had married into the Whitmore family. Now, the connections were becoming impossible to ignore. After the meeting, as shell-shocked board members filed out, Julian caught her arm. The touch sent electricity through her body, reminding her viscerally of their kiss. "That was brilliant," he said softly. "It was necessary," she corrected, pulling away, despite every cell in her body crying out to lean into his touch. "The truth needs to come out. Amara." "Wait." His voice stopped her retreat. "Have dinner with me tonight. She turned back, eyebrow raised. We live in the same house. We eat dinner together every night. No, not in the formal dining room with mother's disapproval seasoning every bite. Just us, somewhere else. Let me take my wife to dinner. The way he said my wife, not with the cold possession of their wedding day, but with something that sounded dangerously like pride, made her heart skip. Why? Because I want to know you, he said simply. Not the woman I imagined you to be, not the facade you show the world, but you, the brilliant mind behind that presentation, the woman who reads financial reports for fun, the daughter who honors her parents by seeking justice. Amara studied him, looking for any sign of manipulation or deceit. She found only sincerity in his gray eyes, along with something else, something that made her think of darkened elevators and earth-shattering kisses. This doesn't change anything, she said finally, but the words lacked conviction. You keep saying that. His smile was gentle, knowing, but we both know everything has already changed. As she walked away, Amara couldn't deny the truth in his words. The careful walls she'd built were crumbling, and she wasn't sure she had the strength or the desire to rebuild them. One kiss had changed everything, awakening possibilities she'd forbidden herself to imagine. That evening, as she dressed for dinner, Amara caught her reflection in the mirror. The woman looking back at her was different from the bride who'd entered this mansion 6 months ago. That girl had been beaten but not broken, trapped but not defeated. This woman was on the verge of something terrifying and exhilarating. The question was, did she have the courage to reach for it, or would the ghosts of the past, this cruelty, her pain, their shared history, prove too heavy to overcome? As she applied a final touch of lipstick, Amara made her decision. She would go to dinner, would listen to what Julian had to say, but she would not let her heart rule her head. There was too much at stake, too many unanswered questions, too much pain between them. The kiss they'd shared might have cracked her defenses, but she wouldn't let it break them completely. Not until she was sure of him, sure of herself, sure of what this newfound connection between them really meant. Because in the cold light of morning, fairy tales didn't exist, and even if they did, she wasn't sure she wanted to star in one anymore. But perhaps something real could grow from these ashes of their beginning, something stronger than fairy tales, something true. Chapter 6. Unveiled Truths. The restaurant Julian chose was intimate and elegant, tucked away in a historic building downtown. No Whitmore family connections, no prying eyes, just them, and the soft glow of candlelight. Amara sat across from him, looking ethereal in a deep purple dress that made her skin glow like polished bronze. "Why here?" she asked, taking in the vintage decor and private corner table. "Because it's the kind of place your parents used to love." Julian watched her expression carefully. "I've been doing my research." Nathaniel and Elise Cade were known for discovering hidden gems in the city, places with character and history. Amara's hand trembled slightly as she reached for her water glass. "You've been investigating my parents?" "I've been investigating everything." He leaned forward, voice low and intense. "And what I found, Amara, it's worse than we thought." Her back stiffened. "Tell me." "Not here." He glanced around meaningfully. "After dinner, there's something I need to show you." The meal passed in a haze of tension and unspoken words. Julian watched as Amara picked at her food, noting how her mind was clearly elsewhere. She'd never looked more beautiful to him or more unreachable. Later, in his private study at the mansion, Julian pulled out a thick file. He had my personal investigator dive deep. He found things that were supposedly destroyed years ago. Amara took the file with steady hands, but her voice shook. "What kind of things?" "Police reports, insurance investigations, medical examiner notes." Julian ran a hand through his hair. "And this?" He pulled out a sealed envelope, yellowed with age. "It was in my father's private safe. A letter from your father, dated 3 days before the accident." Amara stared at the envelope like it might bite her. "Have you read it?" "No. It's not mine to read." She broke the seal with trembling fingers, unfolding paper that held her father's familiar handwriting. As she read, tears began to fall silently down her cheeks. "He knew," she whispered. "He knew they were coming for him." Julian moved closer but didn't touch her. "What does it say?" "Theodore Whitmore and Malcolm Cade," she read, her voice gaining strength. "If you're reading this, Then your plan succeeded. But know this. I've left evidence of your crimes with someone you'll never find. Someone who will know when to bring it forward. You may have won this battle, but you haven't destroyed everything we built. She looked up at Julian, eyes blazing through her tears. He hid something. Something that could prove what they did. And I think I know where. Julian pulled out another document. Your parents' company had a secret research facility. It's not listed in any official records, but I found references to it in old expense reports. A place where they developed their most sensitive projects. The cabin, Amara breathed. Up in the mountains. Dad always said it was just a vacation home, but he spent so much time in the basement, said he was tinkering. Can you find it again? She nodded slowly. I remember the way. We used to spend summers there before. We'll go tomorrow. Julian's voice was firm. First thing in the morning. Your father is still conveniently abroad. And Mother is too busy damage controlling the board meeting to notice our absence. Amara studied him in the soft lamplight of the study. Why are you helping me, really? Julian moved closer, close enough to catch the subtle scent of her perfume. Because I need to know the truth as much as you do. Because I can't be the son of a murderer and do nothing about it. Because every day I spend with you makes me realize how much I've wasted. Fighting against this marriage. Instead of fighting for you. Her breath caught. Julian, I know. He stepped back, giving her space. I know you don't trust me yet. I know 6 months of cruelty can't be erased by a few days of decency. But I'm not asking for forgiveness, Amara. I'm asking for a chance to help make this right. The next morning dawned clear and cold. They took Julian's personal car rather than the family driver, heading into the mountains as the sun painted the sky in shades of pink and gold. Amara sat silently in the passenger seat, lost in memories of happier times on this same road. The cabin, when they finally reached it, looked smaller than she remembered. Nature had begun to reclaim the grounds, ivy crawling up the walls and weeds pushing through the gravel driveway. It's been empty since. She couldn't finish the sentence. Julian touched her arm gently. We don't have to do this today. Yes, we do. She squared her shoulders. I've waited 6 years for answers. I'm not waiting any longer. The key was still hidden under the same loose stone by the back door. Inside, sheets covered the furniture, and dust motes danced in the beams of sunlight streaming through dirty windows. Amara moved through the space like a ghost, touching things her parents had touched, remembering moments from her childhood. The basement door is through here, she said, leading Julian to the kitchen. Dad had a special lock installed, said it was to keep me from playing with his tools, but now, the door was solid steel with a biometric scanner that looked years ahead of its time. Amara pressed her hand to it, holding her breath. A soft beep, then a click. Identity confirmed. Welcome, Amara Cade. He programmed you into the security system, Julian realized. He must have known. Amara's voice trailed off as the door swung open, revealing a staircase descending into darkness. Motion sensors activated as they went down, illuminating not a basement workshop but a state-of-the-art research facility. Computer servers hummed along one wall, while complex equipment filled the rest of the space. This is incredible, Julian breathed. Your father was working on quantum encryption technology that's just now becoming viable. Over here. Amara had found her father's desk, tucked into a corner. A framed photo of their family sat beside a terminal that still glowed with standby power. She sat in her father's chair, fingers hovering over the keyboard. I used to watch him work here. He always said the same thing when he logged in. Her fingers flew across the keys. The truth will set us free. The screen came to life, displaying folders of encrypted data, but what caught their attention was a video file labeled simply, "For Amara." With trembling hands, she clicked play. Nathaniel Cade's face filled the screen, looking exactly as she remembered him. My dearest daughter, he began, if you're watching this, then something has happened to your mother and me. Theodore Whitmore and your Uncle Malcolm have discovered our investigation into their illegal activities. They've been using Whitmore Enterprises to launder money for years, destroying smaller companies and lives in the process. Julian's hand found Amara's shoulder as her father continued. We've gathered evidence, encrypted it using technology they can't break. Everything is here. The financial records, the shell companies, the proof of their crimes. But more importantly, we've hidden something they want desperately. Proof of their connection to organized crime families. That's why they killed them, Julian said softly. Not just for money, but to protect their criminal empire. On screen, Nathaniel's expression softened. Amara, my brilliant girl, I'm so sorry we won't be there to see the amazing woman you'll become. But remember what we always taught you. The truth is worth fighting for, no matter the cost. The video ended, leaving them in silence broken only by Amara's quiet sobs. Julian knelt beside her chair, taking her hands in his. We have everything we need now, he said gently. We can take them down, all of them. Your own father, she reminded him. A man who murdered your parents deserves no loyalty from me. His voice was fierce. I told you I'd help you find the truth, and I meant it. Whatever comes next, we face it together. Amara looked at him, really looked at him, seeing not the cruel man who had rejected her 6 months ago, but someone new, someone fighting his own battles with the truth. It won't be easy, she warned. They'll fight back, try to discredit us, maybe worse. Let them try. Julian's grip on her hands tightened. We have something they don't. What's that? Each other. The words hung between them, heavy with meaning. 6 months ago, they'd been forced together by others' machinations. Now, they were choosing to stand together against those same forces. As they left the cabin, carrying hard drives full of evidence, Amara felt something she hadn't experienced in years. Hope. Not just for justice, but for something more. Something that felt dangerously like a future she might actually want. Chapter 7. The Chase. Julian's pursuit of Amara's heart began in the quiet moments, in the spaces between breaths. He found himself watching her as she worked, marveling at how blind he'd been to her brilliance, her grace, her quiet strength. Every day revealed new facets of her that made his heart ache with regret. For time wasted and love denied. One evening, he found her in their library. He'd started thinking of it as theirs now, this sanctuary where their story had truly begun. She sat curled in her leather chair, lamplight casting a golden glow on her skin as she pored over financial documents. Let me prove to you that I'm not my father, he pleaded, kneeling beside her chair. The position made him vulnerable, but that was the point. With her, he wanted to be vulnerable. Let me show you who I really am, who we could be together. Amara's fingers stilled on the papers. Love isn't a business transaction, Julian. You can't just decide to want me now that you know I'm not what you thought. Is that what you think this is? The pain in her voice cut him deep. He reached for her hand, encouraged when she didn't pull away. Amara, I'm not deciding to want you. I'm finally allowing myself to feel what's been there all along. And what exactly has been there all along? Her eyes met his, challenging. Contempt? Prejudice? Or have you forgotten how you treated me for 6 months? I'll never forget. His voice cracked with emotion. Every cruel word, every cold shoulder, every time I let my mother humiliate, it's burned into my memory. But that man, that prejudiced fool who couldn't see past his own assumptions, that's not who I am anymore. She stood abruptly, needing distance. The moon cast long shadows through the library windows, turning her into something ethereal, untouchable. People don't change overnight, Julian. No, they don't. But sometimes, they have their eyes opened in an instant. He followed her to the window, careful not to crowd her. That night in the elevator, it wasn't just about physical attraction. It was about finally seeing you, really seeing you. And what exactly do you see? The vulnerability in her question made his heart ache. I see a woman who survived unimaginable loss without losing her compassion. He moved closer, drawn to her like a moth to flame. I see a brilliant mind that could have been broken by tragedy, but instead grew stronger. I see someone who fights for truth. Not out of vengeance, but out of a genuine belief in justice. Tears glimmered in her eyes, catching the moonlight like diamonds, but she blinked them away, ever strong. Pretty words from a man who once couldn't bear to look at me. Then let me show you with actions. He pulled an envelope from his pocket. He'd been carrying it for days, waiting for the right moment. I've called an emergency board meeting for tomorrow. We're going to present the evidence about the Foundation's illegal activities. Your father will be there. His flight landed this morning. Julian's jaw tightened. He thinks he's coming home to damage control. Instead, he's walking into an ambush. It's dangerous, Amara warned, but he could hear the shift in her voice concern for him now, not just weariness. Let him try to stop us. I'm done hiding, done pretending, done being the obedient son while he destroys lives. Julian took her hands in his touch gentle but sure. But I need you there with me, not just for the evidence, but because I'm stronger with you beside me. The vulnerability in his voice made her breath catch. Julian, I know you don't trust me yet. I know I haven't earned that. His thumbs traced patterns on her palms, sending shivers up her arms. But trust this. Trust that I want justice as much as you do. Trust that I choose you, here and now, over everything I thought I believed in. Their moment was shattered by Evelyn Whitmore's sharp voice from the doorway. So this is where you've been hiding. Really, darling, consorting with the help? Julian's entire body tensed, but his voice was deadly calm. Mother, my wife is not the help. She's a brilliant businesswoman who has uncovered serious irregularities in our company's finances. Wife? Evelyn's laugh was cruel. That arrangement was meant to be temporary. Surely you don't intend to continue this farce. The only farce here is the image of respectability this family has hidden behind. Julian moved to stand beside Amara, his shoulder brushing hers protectively. Did you know about the murders, Mother? Or did Father keep you in the dark about that too? Evelyn's face went pale. I don't know what you're talking about. No? Then perhaps you'd like to explain these. He turned the large screen toward her, displaying the encrypted files, financial records showing payments to known criminal organizations, shell companies used to launder money, and, most interestingly, large transfers that coincided exactly with the death of Nathaniel and Elise Cade. You're making a mistake, Evelyn hissed. Whatever this girl has told you. This girl is my wife, Julian cut in, his voice vibrating with barely contained fury. And unlike you, Mother, she deals in truth, not manipulation. Truth? Evelyn's laugh was bitter. The truth is that she's turned you against your own family, poisoned you with her lies. Enough. Amara's voice cracked like a whip. The only poison here is the corruption that runs through this family's veins. Tomorrow, the board will see everything. Every illegal transaction, every covered-up crime, every piece of evidence that Nathaniel Cade collected before your husband had him killed. Evelyn's face contorted with rage. You ungrateful little get-out. Julian's command froze the words in his mother's throat. Get out of my study, get out of my house, and get ready for tomorrow, because when the truth comes out, you'll need more than your society connections to save you. After Evelyn fled, Julian turned to find Amara staring at him with an unreadable expression. You didn't have to do that, she said softly. Yes, I did. He moved closer, drawn to her like gravity. For 6 months, I let them treat you like you were nothing. I won't make that mistake again. Why? The question was barely a whisper. Because I'm falling in love with you, Amara Cade Whitmore. He cradled her face in his hand, letting her see every emotion in his eyes. Not the woman I thought you were, but the woman you really are. And I'll spend every day proving that to you, if you'll let me. She stepped back, but there was less certainty in the movement now. Love isn't enough to erase the past. No, he agreed, but it's a hell of a place to start building a future. Outside, storm clouds gathered again, as if nature itself was preparing for the confrontation to come. But inside the library, something else was building, something that felt like hope, like possibility, like the first rays of sun after a long, dark night. Julian watched as Amara returned to her work, her fingers flying over the keyboard as she prepared for tomorrow's revelation. He had never seen anyone more beautiful, more compelling, more worthy of the love that was growing in his heart. Tomorrow would bring chaos and confrontation, but tonight, in this room that had witnessed their beginning, he could finally admit the truth to himself. He was hopelessly, irrevocably falling for the woman he had once promised to never love. And as she worked in the soft lamplight, occasionally glancing at him with eyes that held less weariness and more warmth, he dared to hope that maybe, just maybe, she was starting to fall too. Chapter 8. Rebellion. The annual Whitmore Foundation Charity Gala was the social event of the season. Old money mingled with new beneath crystal chandeliers, while reporters hovered at the edges, hungry for any hint of scandal. Tonight, they would get more than they bargained for. Amara stood before her mirror, smoothing the lines of her midnight blue gown. The dress was a masterpiece of silk and beading, chosen specifically for this night. No more hiding in the shadows, no more playing the submissive wife. Tonight, she would shine. A knock at her door revealed Julian, resplendent in his tuxedo. He stopped short at the sight of her, his gray eyes darkening with appreciation. "You look," he seemed to struggle for words. "Like I belong?" The question held echoes of past pain. "Like a queen." He offered his arm. "Ready to take down an empire?" The ballroom was already packed when they arrived. Evelyn Whitmore held court near the entrance, her silver gown glittering as she greeted guests. Her smile froze when she saw them. "Darling," she called, voice dripping honey over poison, "I wasn't sure you'd attend, given your recent preoccupations." "And miss the biggest night of the season?" Julian's smile was sharp as a blade. "Especially when my wife has prepared such an enlightening presentation about the Foundation's work." Evelyn's perfectly made-up face paled slightly. "Surely you don't intend to let my Stanford-educated wife present her financial findings to our most important donors?" Julian's voice carried just far enough to draw attention. "Of course I do. After all, transparency is one of our core values, isn't it, Mother?" They moved through the crowd, Julian's hand warm against Amara's back. She could feel the stares, hear the whispers. The trophy wife who dared to step out of her place, the son who defied his family's expectations. "Julian." Theodore Whitmore's voice cut through the murmur of conversation. He stood by the stage, commanding attention in his expensive tuxedo. "A word." "Of course, Father." Julian's grip on Amara tightened slightly. "My wife and I would be happy to speak with you." Theodore's face tightened at the inclusion of Amara, but he led them to a quiet corner. "I understand you've been making waves at the company." "We've been uncovering truth," Julian corrected. "Something this family seems to have forgotten the value of." "Truth?" Theodore laughed softly. "Is that what she's been filling your head with? Stories about her parents, about some grand conspiracy?" "Not stories." Amara's voice was steady despite her racing heart. "Evidence. Files. Your own records, Mr. Whitmore." "Be careful, girl." Theodore's voice dropped to a dangerous whisper. "You're playing a game you don't understand." "No, Father." Julian stepped between them. "You're the one who doesn't understand. The game is over." "Julian Whitmore." Evelyn's voice rang out across the ballroom. "What do you think you're doing?" All eyes turned to them. Evelyn stalked over, fury barely contained beneath her society smile. "Making things right," Julian answered. "Loud enough for the gathering crowd to hear. Something this family should have done long ago." "By betraying your own blood?" Evelyn hissed. "For her?" "For the truth." Julian's voice grew stronger. "For justice. For the woman who had the courage to stand up to this family's corruption." The whispers grew louder. Phones appeared, recording the confrontation. Theodore stepped forward, trying to salvage the situation. "My son is obviously confused." "I've never been clearer," Julian cut in. He turned to address the crowd directly. "For years, the Whitmore Foundation has claimed to serve this community. Tonight, my wife will show you exactly how it's been serving itself instead." "Julian, please," Evelyn pleaded. "Think about what you're doing." "I have thought about it. For the first time in my life, I'm thinking clearly." He looked at Amara, his eyes soft, despite the tension in his voice. "Because of her. She's poisoned you against us," Theodore growled. "No," Julian's laugh was bitter. "You did that yourself, the moment you ordered the murder of Nathaniel and Elise Cade." The ballroom went deadly silent. Even the reporters seemed to hold their breath. "That's a dangerous accusation," Theodore said softly. "It's not an accusation." Amara stepped forward, her voice carrying across the stunned crowd. "It's a fact, one we can prove." She nodded to the tech team, and the large screens around the ballroom came to life. Financial records, encrypted files, Nathaniel Cade's video testimony, everything they had discovered in the cabin played out for all to see. "She's my wife," Julian declared as gasps and murmurs filled the room, "and she's worth 10 of any of you." While you were all playing society games, she was working to expose the truth about my father's crimes. Evelyn made a last desperate attempt. Security, remove this woman. Touch her. Julian's voice could have frozen hell itself. And you'll regret it. She stays, she speaks, and you all listen. Amara moved to the podium, her head held high, as she began her presentation, methodically laying out the evidence of years of corruption. She felt Julian's presence behind her like a shield. The crowd's reaction shifted from skepticism to shock to outrage as the truth unfolded. Board members huddled in corners, whispering urgently. Reporters typed frantically on their phones. And through it all, Julian stood proud beside his wife, his support unwavering. When she finished, the silence was deafening. Then, slowly, applause began to build, not polite society, applause, but real appreciation for the courage it took to speak truth to power. Theodore Whitmore had disappeared during the presentation, but Evelyn remained, her face a mask of fury and defeat. You've destroyed everything, she spat at Julian. No, Mother. He took Amara's hand, bringing it to his lips in a gesture that made her heart skip. I finally built something real, something honest, something worth fighting for. As they left the ballroom, reporters calling out questions behind them, Amara felt lighter than she had in years. The truth was out, justice was in motion. And beside her I meant what I said in there. Julian murmured as they reached their car. You're worth fighting for, worth losing everything for. You didn't lose everything, she corrected softly. You gained your freedom, your integrity. I gained more than that. He turned to face her, his eyes intense in the moonlight. I gained a partner, a future, a chance at real love. If you'll let me prove it to you. Amara looked up at him, seeing not the cruel man who had rejected her 6 months ago, but someone new, someone who had chosen truth over privilege, justice over family, love over prejudice. Julian, I know. He smiled softly. You still don't trust me completely. That's okay. We have time, and I plan to spend every moment proving that this is the most real thing in my life. As they drove away from the gala, leaving behind the wreckage of the Whitmore family's reputation, Amara felt something unfamiliar stirring in her heart. It felt dangerous, like hope, like possibility, like the beginning of something she had stopped believing in months ago. Love wasn't a business transaction, she had told him, but maybe, just maybe, it could be a rebellion against the past, against prejudice, against everything that had tried to break them both. Chapter 9. Revenge Served Cold. The morning after the gala, headlines screamed across every major newspaper and news site. Whitmore empire built on blood money, tech mogul's murder exposed, Whitmore heir turns whistleblower. The carefully constructed facade of the Whitmore family's respectability had shattered, and the pieces were still falling. Amara sat in Julian's study, watching the chaos unfold on multiple screens. Her uncle Malcolm had been arrested trying to flee the country, his private jet intercepted on the runway. Theodore Whitmore had vanished, but his accounts were frozen, his properties under surveillance. The FBI just released a statement, Julian announced. Entering with 2 cups of coffee, he'd loosened his tie, and his usually perfect hair was mussed from running his fingers through it. They're formally investigating both the foundation and the main company. And your father? Still in the wind, but not for long. He handed her a cup, their fingers brushing. Every port, every private airfield, every possible escape route is being watched. Amara took a sip, savoring the perfect blend he'd learned how she liked her coffee over their late nights working together. What about Evelyn? Under house arrest at the country club mansion. Apparently, she's already trying to negotiate a deal, claiming she knew nothing about the murders. Do you believe her? Julian's face darkened. I don't know what to believe anymore. The woman who raised me, who taught me about family loyalty and social responsibility, she was living a lie. They all were. And yet you chose truth over those lies. Amara set down her cup, studying him. Why? He met her gaze steadily. Because of you. Because watching you fight for justice, despite everything they did to you, it showed me what real strength looks like. A knock at the door interrupted them. Bennett, the head of security, entered, looking grave. Mr. Whitmore, we found him. Julian straightened. Where? The old hunting lodge in the Adirondacks. And sir, your Uncle Malcolm was just transferred to federal custody. He's talking. Amara's heart raced. After 6 years, justice was finally within reach. Have the helicopter ready in 20 minutes, Julian ordered. Already done, sir. After Bennett left, Amara stood. I'm coming with you. Amara, don't. Her voice was steel wrapped in silk. He killed my parents. I need to see this through. Julian studied her for a long moment, then nodded. Together, then, the helicopter ride was tense with anticipation. Amara watched the landscape blur beneath them, remembering summer trips to the mountains with her parents. How different everything looked now, viewed through the lens of loss and impending justice. The hunting lodge appeared suddenly through the trees, a massive structure of stone and timber that screamed old money and privilege. FBI vehicles surrounded it. Agents positioned at every exit. He's cornered. The lead agent briefed them as they landed. We've got thermal imaging showing one heat signature in the main study. He's armed, but contained. Let me talk to him, Julian said. Sir, that's not protocol. He's my father, and he needs to face what he's done. The agent hesitated, then nodded. Wear a vest, and we'll have snipers on standby if things go south. Amara grabbed Julian's arm as he turned to go. Be careful. His eyes softened as he looked at her. Always. She watched him enter the lodge, her heart in her throat. Minutes ticked by like hours. Movement in the study, her voice crackled over the radio. Subject is agitated. Through the large windows, Amara could see shadows moving. Then, suddenly, Theodore Whitmore's voice boomed through hidden outdoor speakers she'd accessed the lodge's sound system. Come to pass judgment, son? The words dripped with contempt. You, who've benefited from every privilege this family's power provided. I came to understand, Julian's voice replied, calmer but just as clear. How could you do it? The Cades were innocent people. Innocent? Theodore laughed harshly. They were threats. Their technology could have exposed everything we'd built, and that self-righteous attitude about ethical business practices, they would have brought down our entire empire. So you had them killed. It wasn't a question. I had them eliminated. Business is war, son. I taught you that. You taught me lies. Julian's voice grew stronger. You taught me to judge people by their social status, their skin color, their family connections. You taught me to be as empty and corrupt as you are. And yet here you stand, throwing it all away for that girl, their daughter. Have you lost your mind? No, Father. For the first time in my life, I'm thinking clearly. A pause, then, Malcolm told them everything. About the planning, the sabotaged brakes, the offshore accounts. It's over. Malcolm was always weak. Theodore's voice turned ugly, like you've become. I gave you everything, power, position, respect, and you. Throw it away for what? Love? Yes? The simplicity of Julian's answer seemed to hang in the air. For love. For truth. For the chance to be better than what you made me. Sudden movement caught Amara's eye through the window. She saw Theodore raise something that glinted in the light. Gun. The warning crackled over multiple radios, but before anyone could react, Julian's voice cut through again. It's funny, Father. You taught me everything about power, but nothing about love. Amara taught me that. She taught me that real strength isn't in what you take, but in what you give, what you stand for. Sentimental nonsense. Maybe. But while you've been monologuing, FBI teams have entered through the hidden passages. You thought only our family knew about the same passages. Malcolm told them about an hour ago. A commotion erupted inside. Through the windows, Amara saw Theodore Whitmore, the man who had ordered her parents' death, being tackled by agents. His gun clattered to the floor as Julian calmly stepped back. Minutes later, he emerged from the lodge. Amara ran to him, not caring who saw. You're okay. She touched his face, checking for injuries. I'm fine. He caught her hand, pressing a kiss to her palm. It's done. He confessed to everything. And it's all recorded. They watched as Theodore Whitmore was led out in handcuffs, his perfectly tailored suit dusty, his aristocratic features twisted with rage. You'll regret this, he spat as he passed them. Both of you. No, Father. Julian's arm went around Amara's waist. The only regret I have is not seeing the truth sooner, not fighting for what's right sooner, not loving her sooner. As Theodore was placed in an FBI vehicle, Amara felt tears on her cheeks. Justice won't bring my parents back, she whispered. Julian held her hand. No, but it might give us a chance at a future. She looked up at him, seeing the man he'd become rather than the one he'd been. When did you get so wise? When I fell in love with a woman who showed me what real wisdom looks like. He wiped away her tears gently. A woman who fought for truth when everyone tried to bury it, who saw the good in me when I couldn't see it myself. The sun was setting over the mountains, painting the sky in shades of pink and gold as FBI teams processed the scene and media helicopters circled overhead. Julian and Amara stood together, watching the end of one chapter and the beginning of another. What happens now? She asked softly. Now, we rebuild not the Whitmore empire, that deserves to fall, but something new, something honest. He turned to face her fully. Together, if you'll have me. Amara thought of their journey, from forced marriage to reluctant allies to this, whatever this was becoming. It won't be easy, she warned. There will be trials, investigations, media circus. I don't care about easy. His gray eyes were intense in the fading light. I care about right, about truth, about you. She touched his face, feeling the slight tremor that belied his calm exterior. You're really ready to lose everything for this? I'm not losing anything worth keeping. He leaned into her touch. Everything that matters is right here. As helicopters thundered overhead and agents bustled around them, they shared a moment of perfect understanding. The past couldn't be changed, but the future was theirs to write. Take me home, Amara said softly. Julian's smile was tender as he led her to their waiting helicopter. Behind them, Theodore Whitmore's empire crumbled, but ahead lay possibility, hope, and maybe, just maybe, the kind of love stories were written about. Chapter 10. Hearts Unguarded. The Whitmore mansion felt different in the days following Theodore's arrest. The staff moved more freely, as if a heavy cloud had lifted. Evelyn had retreated to the country clubhouse, leaving only silence where her cutting remarks used to echo. But the biggest change was between Julian and Amara. They worked side by side in his study, preparing for the upcoming trials. Evidence needed to be organized, testimonies coordinated with prosecutors, and the company's legitimate operations preserved to protect innocent employees. Yet amid the chaos of dismantling an empire, something else was building. You're staring again, Amara said, not looking up from her laptop. The morning sun painted her skin golden, making her glow against the leather chair she'd claimed as her own. Can you blame me? Julian set down the legal papers he'd been pretending to read. You're incredible to watch when you're focused. She glanced up, a slight blush coloring her cheeks. Flattery won't get these depositions organized any faster. It's not flattery if it's true. He moved to perch on the edge of her desk, close enough to catch the subtle scent of her perfume. Do you know what I thought the first time I saw you? That I was beneath you? The words held no bitterness now. Just a hint of teasing. That you were the most beautiful woman I'd ever seen. His admission made her hands still on the keyboard. And it terrified me. Why? Because I wasn't supposed to find you beautiful. I wasn't supposed to notice how your eyes flash when you're passionate about something, or how your voice gets softer but stronger when you're making an important point. He reached out, tucking a stray curl behind her ear. I wasn't supposed to want you. Amara's breath caught at his touch. Julian, I know. He pulled back slightly, giving her space. I know we're not there yet. But I need you to understand, what I feel for you now isn't new. It was there from the beginning, buried under prejudice and pride, and my father's poisonous influence. She stood, needing to move, to think. And now? Now that your father's influence is gone? Now, I can finally be honest with you. With myself. He followed her to the window, where morning sun streamed through stained glass. I'm in love with you, Amara Cade Whitmore, not because of what you've done or what you've helped me become, but because of who you are. Tears glimmered in her eyes, catching the light like diamonds. And who am I? You're the woman who faced down an empire with nothing but truth as her weapon. The brilliant mind who saw patterns others missed. The daughter who honored her parents by fighting for justice rather than revenge. He moved closer, drawn to her like a moth to flame. "You're the wife I never deserved but always needed." "Pretty words," she whispered, but her voice trembled. "Then let me show you with actions." He pulled an envelope from his desk. "I had my lawyers draw these up yesterday." Amara opened the envelope with trembling fingers. Her eyes widened as she read. "Julian, this is transfer of ownership. Half of everything I own, including my shares in the company, put in your name." He took her hands in his. "Equal partners, in business and in life, if you want it." "Why?" "Because you earned it. Because you deserve it. Because I trust you more than I've ever trusted anyone in my life." His thumb traced patterns on her palm. "And because I want to spend the rest of my life making up for how badly I treated you in the beginning." A tear slipped down her cheek. Julian caught it with his finger, then traced the path it had taken down her face. "You don't have to sign them," he said softly. "You don't have to accept any of this. But I needed you to know. Everything I have, everything I am, it's yours if you want it." Amara looked at the papers, then back at him. "This isn't about the money or the shares." "No, it's not." "Then what is it about?" "Trust. Partnership. Love." He stepped closer, close enough to feel the warmth radiating from her body. "Everything I should have offered you from the beginning." Their first real kiss wasn't born of passion or convenience, but of understanding. Julian traced the tears on Amara's cheeks, marveling at how someone so strong could be so soft. "I was wrong about everything," he murmured against her skin. "You don't deserve your forgiveness." "Then earn it." She challenged, her eyes meeting his with a mixture of vulnerability and strength that took his breath away. His lips found hers, gentle at first, then with growing intensity as she responded. This wasn't like their desperate kiss in the elevator. This was slower, deeper, filled with promise and possibility. When they finally broke apart, both breathing heavily, Julian rested his forehead against hers. "I love you," he whispered. "I think I've loved you since that first night in the library when you showed me how brilliant you are. I was just too blind to see it." Amara's hands fisted in his shirt, holding him close. "I wanted to hate you," she admitted. "It would have been easier." "I know." He kissed her forehead, her cheeks, the corner of her mouth. "I gave you every reason to. But you changed." Her voice was soft with wonder. "You chose truth over family, justice over power." "I chose you," he corrected. Everything else just followed naturally. Outside, the garden staff was preparing for spring planting, new life emerging from winter's remnants, just as their love was blooming from the ashes of their forced beginning. "What happens now?" Amara asked, still held safe in the circle of his arms. "Now, we rebuild. Together." He gestured to the papers on the desk. "Equal partners in everything." She touched his face, studying him with those brilliant eyes that saw straight to his soul. "And if I'm not ready, if I need time, then I'll wait." He turned his head to kiss her palm. "I'll spend every day showing you that this is real, that I'm real, that what I feel for you is the most real thing in my life. And the company, the trials, we face them together. No more hiding, no more pretending." He smiled softly. "Unless you're tired of working with me." "Never." The words slipped out before she could stop them, and the vulnerability in her eyes made his heart ache. Julian pulled her close again, marveling at how perfectly she fit in his arms. Their second kiss was slower, sweeter, full of promises for the future. When they finally returned to work, something had shifted between them. The careful distance they'd maintained was gone, replaced by casual touches, shared smiles, and a warmth that filled the room like sunshine. As evening fell, casting long shadows through the study windows, Julian watched Amara work. She'd kicked off her shoes and curled up in her chair, completely absorbed in her task. Her hair had escaped its elegant twist, curls framing her face in a way that made his fingers itch to touch them. "You're staring again," she said without looking up, but this time there was a smile in her voice. "Always," he replied simply. She glanced up then, and the look in her eyes made his heart stop. It wasn't quite love, not yet, but it was possibility, hope, the beginning of something beautiful, and for now, that was enough. Chapter 11. Love's Awakening. In the library where Amara had spent countless lonely nights, Julian prepared for the most important presentation of his life, not a business proposal, though it involved the company's future, not a legal strategy, though it would change everything about their lives. The room held special significance now. Here was where he'd first seen her brilliance, where she'd opened his eyes to the truth. Now it would be where he offered her everything: his heart, his trust, and his vision for their future. Amara found him there just after sunset, surrounded by documents and his laptop. The sight was so familiar it made her heart ache. How many nights had they spent here, working side by side, falling in love without realizing it? "The board members are getting restless," she said, settling into her usual chair. "They want to know what happens to the company, now that your father's assets are frozen." Julian looked up, drinking in the sight of her. She'd taken to wearing more colorful clothes lately, today choosing a deep emerald blouse that made her skin glow. "Let them wait. I have something more important to discuss." She raised an eyebrow. More important than the company's future? Much more important. He stood, moving to kneel beside her chair. "Be my partner." "I thought I already was." The question held a hint of teasing. "In everything." He pulled out a thick folder. "I had the lawyers draw up partnership papers, not just for the company, but for everything we want to build together." Amara took the folder with steady hands, but he could see the pulse jumping in her throat. "What exactly are you proposing, Julian Whitmore?" "A fresh start. A complete restructuring of Whitmore Enterprises, built on the ethical principles your parents championed." He watched her face as she read, "No more corruption, no more moral compromises, a company dedicated to innovation and social responsibility." Her eyes widened as she saw the details. "You want to rename it Cade Whitmore Technologies?" He touched her hand gently. "Your parents' legacy, combined with the resources and connections of the Whitmore Empire, but reformed, reborn like us." Tears gathered in her eyes. "Julian, there's more." He reached for another document. "I want to establish a foundation in your parents' names, not like the old one. This will be genuine, supporting education for underprivileged students, funding ethical business initiatives, promoting diversity in corporate leadership. The board will fight this. Let them." His voice was steel. "We have controlling interest now, and your financial expertise to back up every decision. They can either join our vision or step aside." Amara set down the papers, studying him intently. "This isn't just about business, is it?" "No." He took her hands in his. "This is about us, about building something together that honors both our pasts while creating a better future. Something that makes up for all the damage my family has done. You don't have to make up for their sins. I know." He kissed her fingers gently. "But I want to build something worthy of you, of us." She touched his face, tracing the lines that worry and determination had etched there. "When did you become this man, this person who cares about more than power and profit?" "When I fell in love with a woman who showed me what real strength looks like." He turned his head to kiss her palm. "When I realized that all the wealth and status in the world meant nothing compared to having you look at me with pride instead of disappointment. And if this fails, if the board revolts, if investors pull out, then we start over, build something new from scratch." His eyes held hers. "As long as we're together, I don't care about the rest." Amara stood, pulling him up with her. She moved to the window, looking out at the garden where spring flowers were beginning to bloom. "I used to dream about this. You know, about making a difference. Using business, not just for profit, but for positive change." She turned back to him. "It was what my parents always taught me, what they died trying to protect." Julian moved behind her, wrapping his arms around her waist. "Then help me make it reality. Be my partner in everything business, life, love." She leaned back against him, fitting perfectly in his embrace. "You already gave me half the company. That was about equality and justice. This," he turned her to face him, "this is about building a future together, about taking all the pain and darkness in our past and turning it into something beautiful, like us." The vulnerability in her voice made his heart ache. "Exactly like us." He brushed away a tear she hadn't realized had fallen. From forced marriage to real love, from prejudice to understanding, from enemies to partners, Amara looked at the papers scattered across his desk, then back at him. It won't be easy. There will be resistance, skepticism. Good thing I have the brilliant Amara Cade on my side. His smile was tender. The woman who took down an empire with nothing but truth and determination. She touched the partnership agreement, fingers tracing their combined names. Cade. Whitmore Technologies. A new legacy. He watched her face carefully. If you want it. Instead of answering, she pulled him down for a kiss that left them both breathless. When they finally parted, her eyes shone with something that looked like love. Equal partners? She asked. In everything. She picked up a pen, her hand steady as she signed her name. Then let's build something beautiful together. Julian's signature joined hers, their names intertwined on paper just as their lives had become intertwined by fate and choice. There's one more thing, he said softly, pulling out a small box. Amara's breath caught. Julian, not an engagement ring, not yet. We'll do that properly when you're ready. He opened the box to reveal a stunning sapphire pendant. This belonged to my grandmother, my real grandmother, not the society wife everyone knew. She was like you, brilliant, passionate about making a difference. She would have loved you. As he fastened the necklace around her throat, his fingers lingered on her skin. Something old, something blue, something finally true. Amara touched the pendant, then turned to face him. I'm falling in love with you, she admitted softly. The real you, the man you've become. I'm already there. He pulled her close. Completely, irrevocably in love with you. The library had seen their beginning, her lonely nights of study, his gradual awakening to her brilliance. Now it witnessed another beginning, one built on choice rather than coercion, love rather than obligation. Outside, the sun had set completely, leaving them in the warm glow of desk lamps, but neither moved to turn on more lights. Some moments were better in soft illumination, where hearts could be unguarded and dreams could take flight. Tell me about your vision, Amara said, curling into her chair with the partnership papers. Show me everything you want us to build together. Julian sat beside her, their shoulders touching, and began to outline their future, not just business plans and corporate structures, but dreams of making real change in the world. As they talked, their hands found each other, fingers intertwining as naturally as their lives had become intertwined. The night deepened around them, but neither noticed. They were too busy planning, dreaming, falling deeper in love with each other and the future they would build together. Chapter 12. Full Circle. They renewed their vows in the same mansion where their story began, but everything had changed. The grand ballroom, once a symbol of the Whitmore family's oppressive wealth, had been transformed. White roses and silver lanterns created an intimate atmosphere, while photographs of Nathaniel and Elise Cade smiled down from tastefully arranged memorial displays. Amara stood before the mirror in what had once been her lonely bedroom, now transformed into a luxurious bridal suite. Her wedding dress was different this time, chosen by her. Ivory silk fell in elegant lines, incorporating subtle patterns from her African heritage. The sapphire pendant Julian had given her provided her something blue, while her mother's pearl earrings connected her to the past she honored. A knock at the door revealed Julian, breaking tradition to see his bride before the ceremony. I know it's bad luck, he said, stopping short at the sight of her, but I couldn't wait. Haven't we had enough bad luck? Amara turned to face him fully. Besides, nothing could be worse than our first wedding day. Julian crossed the room in 3 strides, taking her hands in his. I was such a fool that day, blind to the treasure standing right in front of me. And now? Her voice was soft, teasing. Now, I see everything. He traced her cheek gently. The brilliant mind that challenged me, the strong heart that forgave me, the beautiful soul that taught me what love really means. Tears threatened to ruin her makeup. Julian, I promised to never love you, he continued, his voice rough with emotion. And I broke that promise. I promised to never touch you, and I thank God I broke that too. The only promise I want to make now is to spend every day making up for the pain I caused. Amara's response brought tears to his eyes. Sometimes the worst promises broken lead to the best ones kept. They'd written their own vows this time, speaking from hearts that had learned to trust and love against all odds. The guest list was smaller, filled with people who had supported their transformation, employees who had stood by them during the company's restructuring, board members who had embraced their new vision, friends they'd made along their journey. Evelyn Whitmore was notably absent, having chosen exile over facing the consequences of her actions. Theodore Whitmore watched from prison as his son dismantled his corrupt empire and rebuilt something noble in its place. But their absence only highlighted how far Julian had come from the man they'd raised him to be. During the reception, Julian led Amara to the library, their sanctuary, their beginning. "I have something for you," he said, pulling out an envelope. Inside, Amara found the deed to a familiar mountain cabin. "Julian, I had it restored, exactly as it was when you were young." I explained. "Your father's research facility is now a state-of-the-art lab for developing ethical technology solutions. And upstairs, the family home. I remember," she finished, tears falling freely now. "Our weekend retreat," he corrected gently, "a place to remind us where we came from and show us where we're going." She pulled him down for a kiss that tasted of joy and promises kept. When they broke apart, Julian rested his forehead against hers. "I love you, Amara Cade Whitmore. Not because I have to. Not because of circumstances or obligations, but because loving you is as natural as breathing. And I love you, Julian Whitmore, not despite our past, but because of how far we've come, because you had the courage to change, to choose love over prejudice, truth over power." They danced their first dance as a truly married couple under stars visible through the ballroom's glass ceiling. The song was one her parents had loved, its melody carrying memories of happier times and promises of better days ahead. "What are you thinking?" Julian asked, holding her close. "About endings and beginnings." She looked up at him, love shining in her eyes. "About how sometimes the worst starts can lead to the most beautiful finishes." "This isn't a finish," he corrected softly. "It's just the beginning of our real story." The night deepened around them, stars twinkling overhead like diamonds scattered across velvet. But the real jewels were in their hearts. Trust rebuilt from betrayal, love grown from hatred, a future forged from a past they'd overcome together. Their first kiss wasn't born of passion or convenience, but of pure, unrestrained joy. And as they came together, surrounded by the love they'd fought so hard to find, both knew that some promises were meant to be broken so that better ones could be made. For in the end, their story wasn't about revenge or redemption, wealth or power. It was about two hearts finding their way to each other despite every obstacle, about love that grew in the most unlikely soil, blooming into something more beautiful than either could have imagined. And as they danced beneath the stars, holding each other close, they knew that their greatest adventure was just beginning. For true love stories don't end with happily ever after. They begin there.